Welcome to the Single Era Diaries, exploring the journey of a woman who hasn't experienced what it's like to be single in her entire adult life, and pretty much most of her teenage life too. Each episode will navigate the journey of finding a sense of identity, exploring the challenges of co-parenting, finding love of self and healing, all whilst tackling the complexities of the checkered landscape of dating and dating apps, meeting new people, and operating solo in a world that celebrates couples, marriage, and codependency. I am your host, founder of Nascent Media and newly single woman, Jade, and this is the diary of my single era. I have to start remembering that I need to record these not only in audio but also in video. So there are plans afoot for this to be on the Nascent Media YouTube channel. So this week's episode is going to be on YouTube as well as being on audio. So make sure that you're signed up to the YouTube page of Nascent Media. But this week's episode of the Single Era Diaries is all about love languages, which I, once again, hadn't really heard of before this period of time that I now find myself single. And I'll also be talking about the aspects of self-love that I believe are absolutely vital when we're going to start putting ourselves back out there into the world to meet people, to hang out with people, to get to know new people. Just the whole premise of why self-love is so very important. And particularly when you come out of a relationship and you're looking to rebuild your confidence and your self-esteem again, the reasons why you have to love yourself first, because when you love yourself first, that's when love can manage to find you again. But love languages. So doing the research for the show, one of the pieces that I came across that really gave me some food for thought was the whole concept of asking on a first date, what is your love language? And I really don't know how I feel about that. I still haven't quite wrapped my head around whether that's the sort of first date question you would ask. But interestingly, on one of the dating apps that I have now withdrawn from momentarily, which is Hinge does have the question around what is your love language as one of the preset questions. So there is an opportunity for you to kind of in advance share that information with a view of either attracting somebody that speaks that love language or understands that love language, or just simply has the capacity to hold space for that particular love language. But you might be like me and you might be thinking, what on earth is a love language? Like, I've never heard of that. I had not heard of it either. In fact, the first person I heard speaking about love languages was a fellow podcaster, really influential woman from the US called Rachel Hollis. I love her podcast. If you haven't heard it, the Rachel Hollis podcast, highly recommended. She has spoken about love languages because she also went through a divorce in the last couple of years, and she, similar to myself, she'd been with her ex-husband Dave, but Rachel was talking about her relationship that she had with Dave, which was around for 16 years, pretty similar to myself and my ex. And they also went through this whole process of sort of the back end of the pandemic, just sort of figuring out who they are and what they want, and it transpires that separate paths is what they wanted to pursue. So Rachel is somebody that is very heavily into personal development, lots of learning and developing new tools for better living. And I was listening to a podcast of hers a while back, and she spoke about love languages, and she mentioned love languages in relation to the partner that she's with now. So she's got a new boyfriend who she's been with for, some time. And I was like, what on earth's a love language? It's clearly something that I've missed again, and it transpires that yes, it is something that I've missed. So when it comes to what a love language is, apparently everybody has a set of love languages. Everybody has a way in which they show love and express love, and we all have a way in which we prefer to receive love. the really challenging thing is that if you don't have an awareness of what your love language is, and you're perhaps in a relationship or you're dating and there isn't an awareness on the part of the other person, then you could quite literally be speaking different languages of love. And what one person could feel is an expression of their love, the other person, it might not be landing for them. They might not even see or view or acknowledge the fact that that is their love language. So what are they? What are love languages? Well, there are apparently 5. There are 5 key love languages. The first is words of affirmation. So this is the whole, if you love words, you love language, you love being spoken to in a loving way, or you love speaking in a loving way, perhaps you really enjoy paying compliments to the person that you're with, or one way that you show up or show your affection is by saying that I love you very often, or saying nice things very often. If words of affirmation is the love language that sits with you, then it really is all about the vocalizing of those emotions and the expressing of those emotions through words. The next love language is receiving gifts. And I kind of, when I read that this is one of the love languages, I was like, well, isn't that just really materialistic? But I think it's really important with all of these love languages to view it not just from being the recipient, but also being the giver. And so for somebody that has the love language of receiving gifts, it won't only be about receiving them. The way that that person who has that as their love language will communicate their love to you will also be buying you gifts. And it doesn't necessarily have to be buying per se. It could be making you a mixtape. It could be, I know we don't make mixtapes anymore, but the premise I'm hoping that you will understand. It could be baking something for you. It could be picking some flowers. It doesn't necessarily have to have a monetary value, but the premise of giving and receiving gifts, if that is your language of love, then it will really mean a lot to you, and you will feel loved and you will feel responded to and cared for if somebody is either giving you that gift, or if you're the person that's your language, you actually give those gifts away to others. So the next love language is quality time. So if quality time is your love language, you really respond to somebody making time for you, somebody carving out time out of their busy schedule or whatever it is that they're doing to actually be with you and to spend that quality time. And equally, thinking about your being the giver, if that's your love language, you will ensure that you're creating time and space to be with that other person that you care about, if that's the language of love of which you speak. The next one is acts of service. And acts of service, I was kind of wondering how exactly does that play out? I mean, is that to the extent of, sort of receiving gifts, buying gifts? But I actually think that acts of service is more like doing things unprompted. So, for example, being like, oh, I noticed that your car needed washing, so I've taken it to the car wash. Or another act of service could be, I saw that you'd hung up your jackets to be dry cleaned, so I just took them for you. So it's doing actual physical things in the world that is of service to the person that you care about and you love. And equally so, then that would be your way of showing love as well. Like if that's the way in which you if that's the way that you speak the language of love. And the last one is physical touch. Physical touch is one that I'm definitely not. I'm not in. I mean, I'm a hugger, and I'm like a European, like double kiss on the cheek. But beyond that, like physical touch, like I need space. I need space, proximity, space. But physical touch is definitely a love language that, some people are really into. And I think it does depend on the person. I think it depends on the scenario. But if that is your love language, like you're presumably, I would imagine you're very tactile, like the public displays of affection, the hand holding, the arms around, the cuddles, like the draping over, like actually like caressing, like that's a very important way for you to sort of give and to receive love. So they're all quite different. I mean, the fact remains that we all have our own preferred way of communicating. that we love somebody. And the challenge can occur in a relationship if you are speaking different languages and you don't understand that that's the person's way of communicating their love to you. Then it could well be that you're feeling unappreciated, feeling unvalued, feeling unloved, feeling uncared for, but the other person could actually be thinking, gosh almighty, like I just keep taking their dry cleaning and they're not even noticing that I'm doing these things. Like this is the way that I show that I love them. So there is that can be going on. But how does that then translate to dating? So as mentioned, one of the things that you can do on Hinge is you can select what your love languages are. There are so very many options though for you to select that there's no guarantee, there's no continuity with profiles. So not everybody will answer as to what their love language is. One of the things that I did come across, however, was whether you should ask it on a first date, and I'm a bit bamboozled by that. I don't know how I would feel about sharing that level of detail right off the bat in a first date, but presumably by the time, and I'm saying presumably because I've only been on one date, so I actually don't necessarily know how these things work, but I would imagine that you've had enough of a preamble conversation so that you've got a sense of rapport and a sense of like who that person is and how things will land, so that by the time you actually get to sit down in person, asking that kind of question wouldn't be an issue necessarily, because you've already kind of covered the sort of the peripheral topics of conversation before you get into it. But the other challenge, I guess, with asking that on a first date is if the person doesn't actually know what their love language is. So say they haven't heard of it, and that could, I feel it could sort of expose you to feeling a little uncomfortable, like it could just not land at all, and then it could just sort of derail the conversation from blossoming any further. There is a way to identify in the other person. I mean, there's sort of ways of which you can sort of see that that's somebody's love language. So I'm thinking about it from my own perspective. So words of affirmation is definitely my love language. I mean, you can do quizzes on this. I'll actually link a couple of quizzes in the show notes so you can have a little look and do a quiz to find out what your love language is. But words of affirmation is absolutely mine, and that's because as a creative person, as a writer, as a speaker, words are really so valuable. I really believe in communicating, and I think that saying how you think and how you feel and expressing that either in the written word or in the spoken word is really what it means to be human. So I have always very long had this sort of dreamy desire to just receive love letters. Like I just think that like people transmuting their feelings and their emotions into words is really beautiful. And also songs, music, like the way in which love is spoken about and that you're actually able to put that over. I just think it's just so beautiful. And I would prefer that if I had to choose, say, physical touch or words of affirmation, I'd probably go for words, unless it's doing, like other stuff. But in the most part, it would be words. The acts of service is apparently, just to kind of bounce around a little bit, acts of service is apparently the rarest of the love languages. The people who thrive, you thrive off this love language if you enjoy somebody doing something for you without being asked. So like, let's say you're dating and your date comes round to pick you up and they just pop the vacuum out. I mean, that's an act of service. I don't know how impressed I would be if that were to happen in my life. But receiving gifts, just to come back to that as well, because it could very much be perceived as being a materialistic approach. It isn't always true. It could be like quite a small gift. And whilst it is quite materialistic, I do know that so not in sort of like a love, like a romantic love, but love as in like my mum, for example, her love language is giving gifts and receiving gifts, like buying stuff for people to let them know that she loves you and she cares about you is absolutely the way that she communicates. Like that's her thing. And like she really appreciates like the thought that goes into things as well. So I can definitely see how that can play out. And I do think that there is an element of that in me. Like I love like surprises. I'm saying these things and I don't have these things and I haven't had these things, but I would very much love to have like a surprise. Like, I'm taking you here, or I'm doing this, or, you don't have to think, just pick out a lovely dress and turn up. Like that for me, I can't work out whether that scenario would be like an act of service or whether it would be a receiving gifts. But the critical factor about love languages and why it's so important is because if you can learn your own love language, first of all, and understand how that works and how it plays out for you, but then if you can also learn your prospective partner, the person you're dating, the person you're seeing, the person you're hanging out with, the person that you're in a relationship with, if you can understand what their love language is, then both of you together can actually strengthen your relationship. You can strengthen the relationship in whatever guise it is, serious, not serious, fun, moving somewhere, not moving somewhere. You have an opportunity to actually strengthen that dynamic and to connect more deeply with one another because you're understanding how the other person expresses their feelings. And that fundamentally is what love language is about. It's about expressing how you feel about that person. It's expressing your appreciation, it's expressing your gratitude, and it very often it will speak volumes, it will speak far louder if you understand that person's love language than if you don't. And I guess when you're dating, the challenge that you have, especially in sort of modern dating world terms, is that you are likely strangers. You're strangers to begin with. Because we live in this sort of much wider world now, and, it's not like how, it is obviously for very many people where you would sort of maybe meet somebody in your local town or, whatever, and you get to know them, or you've worked with them, or you've studied with them. The age that we're in with dating apps is you're meeting people who are completely, you have no idea about them. You only have an insight into what they have shared on the app, and then anything else that kind of comes afterwards. So you are, for all intents and purposes, strangers, and you're trying to kind of calibrate and to understand and to get to know each other in the context of a world that's really busy. So when you are dating, and if you are dating somebody that's completely brand new to you, I actually think that having an understanding of what lands for you is really going to help facilitate the dynamic. It's going to help facilitate those communications. And I say this because as somebody that is so very enamoured with the notion of communicating and so very enamoured with the whole premise of expression. So like, don't bottle things up. Don't keep it in. Like, share what you're thinking, say what you're feeling, just be open and honest and transparent. And, you don't have to be unkind about it, but, at least be forthright and candid about how you're feeling, and you can wrap it up in whatever bow that you want. But I feel that, having an awareness of that and communicating that to the person with whom I'm dating or seeing or whatever will really help to facilitate, and vice versa. Like, if the person would be open to sharing what their love language would be, then of course that's really going to help facilitate things. So I can see the advantages of kind of sharing that. Maybe not on the first date. I do feel like that's a little bit early doors. Like the first date is like, I don't know, it's like when you walk through the doors of the department store, like there's nothing worse than being like completely bombarded by all of the salespeople in the department store. Like, you just want to have a little moment to browse. That first date is like you've gone into the shop and you just want to browse a little bit. So maybe not the first date, maybe the second date. Maybe the second date is the time to ask the question, what's your love language? But I think, love languages are really vital. But what I also think is really vital is the journey of self-love, and it's learning to love yourself, and it's learning to understand yourself. And one of several motivating factors for my removing myself from dating apps at the moment is because I do feel that I need to pour more into myself before I put myself through what feels like a really horrendous audition process. Like, it's so torturously hard. Like, the majority of people that I've spoken with on those apps, and I say the majority, there's like literally a handful of people who have just the capacity and the capability to actually hold a conversation decently. But it's really, really, really difficult to go on there and to sort of withstand that if you don't have a sense of sort of self-love and self-adoration. And I think because the way in which these apps play out, where things seem to sort of fizzle out quite quickly, if they don't evolve quickly, like if they're not progressing, like it just seems that once the momentum's lost, it's like gone off a kilter. And I think you have to be very self-assured, and you have to have a pretty big sense of self-worth to be able to contend with that, because otherwise the risk is that you're putting yourself out there and you're exposing your vulnerabilities, of course, but you're also, I think each time you put yourself out there and you connect with somebody and you think that there's some slim chance that it could go, well, anywhere. I mean, you don't know where it's going to go at all, but you sort of, you get along and there appears to be some rapport and you think, oh, okay, well, this could be cool. Like the next stage would be to, maybe like meet in person and to have a chat, and it doesn't go anywhere. That can actually be really challenging to process. Perhaps not for everybody. I'm sure that there are people who are much more seasoned and much more comfortable with this process than I am. And there are a lot of people that I see online through like Instagram and TikTok who are, I've been dating for like 8 years, or like, and I always find it fascinating when I do go back onto those apps, which I do occasionally. I go, you know what, I'm just going to try. In fact, I did it just this week. I was like, I'm going to give Bumble a go. And I lasted less than 24 hours because I was just like, this is horrible. But my point is, when you go back onto them, if you do remove your profile and go back on, it's all the same faces. It's all the same faces and all the same people. And it does beg the question, how successful are these apps at facilitating relationships if all of the same people are on there? Surely the premise of them is that you go on there and you connect with a handful of people and you explore where that could go, and then if it doesn't work out with that handful of people, then of course you would continue being on there. But I do find it bizarre that there's just the same people that are on these apps, on all of the apps as well. Like if you go on multiple apps, like there's the same people on all of them that are evidently not moving into relationship. And so you do have to beg the question, like, why is that? Why is that? The point with self-love, however, is if you are lacking in that self-love and that self-worth and that self-confidence, I think it can do a couple of things. I think it can expose you to not having the standards that you should have for yourself. I think if you don't have that sense of self-love and self-adoration, and you're seeking that validation from outside of yourself, and you're looking for that to be given to you from the people that you're engaging with on these dating apps, if you're in that place, then there is so much scope to get hurt. Because what it feels like to me is that these dating apps are, I mean, I'm sure there are relationships that do blossom from these apps, but in my limited experience, the people that are on there, like, I don't know whether they are maybe a bit like me, like they're just maybe not fully ready, and so they're kind of half-arsing it a little bit, and that's absolutely fine. I think exploring what the options are is fine. I think the challenge comes, however, that there are of course going to be some people who are really, like, they're ready and open for love, and they're engaging with people who maybe just aren't there yet. And so if you don't have that very firm sense of self, and you don't have that very clear notion of, well, this is who I am and what I bring to the table, then you could really easily fall into a rabbit hole where you end up getting hurt by somebody. And that's not to say that you can 100% protect yourself from getting hurt. Of course not. Like, there's going to be risk whatever you do. Like, there's risk if you stay on your own, you aren't going to find love. There's risk if you get into a relationship with somebody from a dating app? Like, is it going to progress? Is it not going to progress? Like, there's so many variables. The whole thing is so incredibly nuanced, but it is, without question or doubt, absolutely vital to have a sense of self and a sense of self-worth and a sense of self-love, so that if you're being mucked about, you can just be cool about it and just be like, well, you know, it's not about me anyway. I do firmly believe that when people are being perhaps avoidant or not coming back to you or not communicating, that it really is that they have things going on. And I just think we need to be much more tolerant and much more respectful of that. If you were to Google sort of dating coaching or dating advice, or go onto any of the social media platforms, like the rhetoric that there is out there on how you should behave to people that don't respond to you or who don't get back to you is absolutely abhorrent. Like, it's not necessary to delete and block somebody just because they don't message you back. Like, let's just be adult about it and just be cordial and accept that people have things going on in their lives that you have no insight into and you have no view of. And so you can't place all of these expectations on people where you don't even know what their middle name is. Like, you don't know these people. So pouring the time and the love into yourself is, I think, step one before getting into love languages. Like, if you're new to the dating market and the dating scene like I am, taking the time to love yourself first and get to know yourself again. Like, love yourself, get to know yourself, rebuild your confidence, refine that sense of self-worth. I cannot advocate enough for how vital it is to rebuild your confidence again before you go back out there. Because what you need to have, I feel, in this dating landscape is a bit of Teflon-like skin. You're going to have a bit of a thick skin, because not everybody's necessarily going to have your same values. Not everybody's necessarily going to be in the right mindset or in the right place to be dating right now. There's, again, lots of nuance, lots of variables. And I just really believe that we all need to hold a lot more space and grace for each other, because speaking from my own experience, where I think really now moving through to the sort of the good part of starting to feel much better again after the breakdown of my former relationship. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm ready to be in another relationship. In fact, I'm absolutely, as I sit here now speaking on this podcast, I'm absolutely not. But it's still necessary to put yourself out there again, I guess. And you can do that once you've learned to love yourself again, and when you've poured into yourself and you believe that you are worthy of love, because you are worthy of love, and you're worthy of adoration, and you're worthy of all of the really lovely things that happen and come with connecting with another human being and being in love, which is one of the most beautiful, magical sensations in the entire universe, I think. But you have to love yourself first before you can get to that. Thank you so much for listening. And as ever, if you like this episode, if you gained anything from it, if you think that it can help a single friend or even a friend that's in a relationship, then do please like and share the episode. We're also, the Single Era Diaries is now on Substack. Substack is a really great resource for writers and creatives to share their thoughts, to build community, and the Single Era Diaries is on there, where I'll be writing a different piece each week, just really sharing some tips and advice, and also reflecting on what's going on in my own dating life, which is pretty stagnant right now, but there we go. And there'll also be transcripts from the podcast on there as well. So if there are particular themes that you have enjoyed and you think, yeah, I'd really love it if they could go a little bit deeper into that, then the transcripts will be on there for you to have a little look around. If you're dating out there, date safely, won't you? And peace out. The Single Era Diaries is produced and distributed by Nascent Media and executive produced by me, Jade Graham. Podcasts grow by being liked and shared, so if you enjoyed today's show, then please be sure to like and share with a friend who you think will enjoy the show too. Subscribe, and if you have a moment to rate and review, wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, that would be super appreciated too. Thank you for listening, and peace out.